show and welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Maqbool, with you at PTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at, of course, the developments that have been going on within the country regarding the law and order situation, particularly, of course, what has happened in Balochistan within this week as well. Since Sunday, we've seen that a series of terrorist acts have, of course, taken place within the province, targeting many different people and, of course, also including security forces and personnel, ordinary citizens and many more. And unfortunately, more than about 50 lives have been lost in these series of attacks. We, of course, have the Prime Minister of Pakistan going to Kuwait on a one-day visit, where he also chaired the National Action Plan's Apex Provincial Committee. And this, of course, talked about what exactly is going to be the next step, as of course, the way that we have seen the situation continue and deteriorate even further. It is of utmost importance that there is a coordinated strategy and move forward in terms of the plan targeting these terrorist activities in not just Balochistan, but of course the entire country as well, but with a special focus on what can be done within this province that unfortunately for the past 2 decades or so has been marred by such attacks. And of course a series of elements from outside of Pakistan have also spoiled the situation even further. And this is of course what the Prime Minister also referred to in terms of the interests of Pakistan and the fact that the way that we want to engage with different elements politically, those that of course who are talking about various things, is different than how we want to engage with the terrorist groups and organizations that have no room for dialogue, and there is zero tolerance for any such activities within the province. And that of course is important, especially in terms of the action plan forward and the way that this is going to be taken up in terms of the police force that is going to be deployed there, and then of course the way that the federal government is going to be moving forward with ensuring that the security is enforced within this province as well. We of course know that the BLA has claimed responsibility for these attacks, but what exactly will be the way forward and how will the people of Balochistan be protected from these terrorist incidents is something that will be a matter of discussion today. And of course we'll take a closer look into how this falls within the Azm-e-Istikam of the Prime Minister as well, and what actions are going to be taken to further equip the security personnel, many of whom have laid down their lives for the protection of the province in these attacks, and of course the country as well. And then what exactly will be the way forward with the way that the province and the federal government is going to take up the menace of terrorism together. That is going to be our focus in the debate today. For this and of course further discussion on how we're going to move forward, I've been joined as always in the studios by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi and Faisal. We've also been joined online by Brigadier Raashid Janjua, who's Director of Research IPRI. Thank you very much, Brigadier Janjua, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. And I'm going to start with you with reference to, of course, what has been going on in Balochistan now. And we also have the Prime Minister visiting. He chaired the National Action Plan's Provincial Apex Committee. He talked about zero tolerance. He talked about action plans that are required and what exactly will be the next step. And he's been, of course, very, very vocal in the way forward when dealing with terrorist groups. And he has made it very clear that there is no room for dialogue. And so I want your take, particularly in terms of how the country together will move forward in light of these attacks, because this is not just something that we've seen in perhaps more sporadic ways that were seen earlier. This was a series of attacks and perhaps well planned in ways that it was executed, also unfortunately targeting the civilian population as well, and very executionist in its approach and style in some aspects as well. And so I want your take in terms of whether or not there is going to be a fundamentally different way that we're going to be taking a look at Balochistan when we talk about our fight against terrorism.
Thank you, Sana. It's very reassuring to see the Prime Minister visiting Balochistan and promising all resources for the armed forces and the law enforcement agencies, and showing full solidarity with the provincial government to fight this menace. The situation indeed is quite alarming, but this is not something which was not visualized, because Balochistan was on the boil sedulously. So these incidents have been happening in the past as well. We know that there was an attack on the law enforcement's compound in Panjgor, Noshki, and that was of the similar nature, bold, audacious, and it was repelled after incurring a lot of casualties. Then there was an attack on Mach, where according to some reports, around 378 PLA activists, they stormed the Much jail. They were beaten back, of course, and there were reports of large casualties on their part. And in the past also, we have seen this pattern that in order to create a reign of terror, they have been targeting the settlers from other provinces who come for different jobs and avocations in Balochistan, and who, by their labors and by their hard work, have enriched Balochistan. So this is indeed very disheartening for those who have done their best to integrate with the Baloch population and work in places like Quetta. Now, the objective is very clear, and the grandmasters behind the scenes who are orchestrating and who are moving these strings are very clear. It is a imprint of Indian raw all over the place, because if you see very carefully, the whole arc of insurgency, which starts from D.I. Khan, Zob, Kila Saifullah, and all the way going to Khuzar. And from there onwards, it picks up the traction because it is the mouth of the CPEC. And from Bela hub, it goes along the coastal highway all to these restive coastal belts. And the terminus of the CPEC is Gwadar. And by a IPRI similarity, the same places are most insurgency ridden. So one can always very easily surmise as to who is behind these attacks. Those who do not want Balochistan to be destabilized, and those who don't want CPEC to be a success, those who visualize such infrastructural connectivity projects as strategic and commercial threats. So that thing should be very clear. And there is a lot of confusion doing the rounds, and several analysts have been writing in prestigious national dailies without understanding the basic context. And you see, we cannot extrapolate the past and predict the future. The realities have changed, the environment has altogether changed, and this insurgency is externally abetted. It has the internal elements who are collaborating, but it's a large scale funding and the motivation is out. So we should be very clear on that score. And there are people who say that in the previous 70s era and 80s era, those insurgents were allowed to come back, like Harbiar Murray, who was brought back by Janjua ul Haq and he was offered amnesty and then he stayed in Quetta till his death. But we are forgetting that at that time, their insurgency had lost steam because of large sacrifices and kinetic actions by the state. And they were in Afghanistan and they were being actually threatened. People were hurling death threats at the likes of Khairbakhsh Murray. So that was a godsend for him when Pakistani state called him back. And he came back, he settled. But the same poison was passed on to his progeny. We know Harbiar Murray, how he went and got educated and stayed in Afghanistan, then Moscow, then came back in 1992, and he was made a provincial minister also. Having partaken of all the state largesse and having tasted the fruits of power, they again, started the same narrative. And now the Harbiar Murray is also out, and the second tier that he had trained and he had indoctrinated has taken over. The likes of Majid Lango and Ghaffar Lango, they took on the whole insurgency campaign, and they are the now mid-tier leaders. And the tribal Sardar leadership is outside. They are poisoning the world opinion, and they are, creating all sorts of falsehoods there. So that is why the insurgency inside is being externally abetted, and internally it is comprising those disaffected people who are negatively indoctrinated both in interior and in the coastal belt. Dr. Allah Nazar and his followers, they are also following the same ideology. They may be disparate geographically and a little by way of tribal affiliations, but their ideology is same. So this ideology needs to be countered. This is violent. This does not believe in this concept of state. It panders to separatism, and it's not a rights-based movement, because those who ask for the rights, the state has engaged with them. State has tried its best to assuage their grievances, and by that analogy, there are so many places inside Pakistan, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, in Punjab, which are more deprived. But does anyone give them the carte blanche to take up the arms against the state? No. So this Baloch insurgency has to be viewed in that context. Then there are insurgency heavens inside our neighboring countries. Those cross-border movements and safe sanctuaries, they provide a kind of sustenance to these insurgencies that sustain them beyond their actual capacity to sustain themselves. So these are the realities in which we are operating, and we should not try and lionize the narrative of these sub-nationalists, and we should not conflate rights-based movements with this kind of insurgency, which is making no distinction between the combatants and non-combatants. And the whole aim is to destabilize and create a reign of terror.
Absolutely. And Faisal, I want your take on this as well, that while we talk about the way that we want to move forward, of course, and we understand the role of international elements and spoilers from within the region, and I understand what they exploit and how they operate, but I want your take on what exactly will the government or the state be able to do about it. Of course, we've put that forward on various platforms, but in terms of actions that can be taken to protect our own citizens, in terms of what we can do within our own borders, what is it that has been missing so far?
Yes, and obviously when we talk about what there has been that was missing, and to me, I think whatever is required from the security services and from the intelligence services of Pakistan, they are delivering at their best. And
Sure.
So far, of course, if there are these elements successfully conducting a few of the raids, then there are many raids that, of course, do not get any existence just because of one reason, that the security forces are, of course, at their best. But when it comes to, of course, what's the way forward and how, of course, the federal government and the provincial government can move along with it. Very, recently, I mean, earlier this year, we remember that there was this attack that Pakistan conducted in within Iran, Sarawan city. 7 were the points where surgical strike was successfully conducted, and even its success was accepted by Iranian government itself, in which they said that, of course, none of their own citizens got killed in that, and all of them who got killed, they were, of course, the foreigners. Of course, they were BLA and BLF outfit people, they were there. And by the way, we remember, and Farrukh rightly pointed out yesterday when he said that while that sit-in was going on in Islamabad, few of them who got killed in Sarawan, their name was actually discussed here, and was said that, look, they have been killing our relatives in of course, Sarawan, Iran. What were they doing there? And right after that, we remember that there was a high-level delegation that came to Islamabad, and Tehran and Islamabad, they had very good negotiations about them. And then we remember that the intelligence operators on both sides of the borders, they agreed to, of course, share intelligence, and I think that was a way forward on that border. The similar agreement and similar sort of intelligence sharing is required on this border as well, with the Taliban regime sitting in Kabul. similar kind of steps are needed to be taken on this side as well, because if we look at Afghanistan, I mean, Afghanistan's two of the cities, Kabul and Kandahar, they are of course easily accessible from within Pakistan, and of course rest of the borders, it's a very mighty border, and of course BLA and BLF, they get facilitations on their side. At the same time, what is required from the Afghan Taliban regime, that they have to have a mechanism with Pakistan aligned. Of course, when they talk about TTP, they always consider TTP as an ally against US, because they have been of course fighting against US together. So they are reluctant in that context. But when it comes to BLA and BLF, the reluctance shouldn't be accepted, because of course they are getting catered from there, and the arms which are being recovered from these terrorists, BLA terrorists, they are of course the very arms which were left by the Americans in Afghanistan. How do they get in the hands of the terrorists? That too is a huge question mark which needs to be asked from of course the Afghan authorities. So this is the way forward. The solution is to of course have an intelligence sharing in place with Afghanistan as well, so that both the borders which are being of course exposed to Balochistan, they can be ensured at the same time, same from Iranian side and same from the Afghani side as well. And when we of course talk about BLA and BLF within Balochistan, their sympathizers, be they protesting somewhere for the missing persons, or someone who's in any of the cities of Balochistan, they need to be of course taken to task. They need to be treated as sympathizers of terrorism. And one more thing, that few of the internal spoilers of Pakistan, they have been of course taking this incident as if people from one province are carrying out activities against people from the other province. This should not be given any space within our narratives. The only narrative that should be taken forward is that Pakistanis, be they Punjabi or Baloch or Sindhis or Pashtuns or Kashmiris, Punjabis, it's not about the Punjabis, it's about the Pakistanis getting of course martyred by the terrorists. And them terrorists, I mean, they don't have any ethnicity, they don't have any race, they don't have any religion, and this is how they must be treated. And of course whoever is sort of investing in this terrorism, their ultimate goal is to have unrest throughout Pakistan, have all of the races fight against each other, so that there is internal unrest.
Right.
And with that internal unrest, the progress as a country of Pakistan can be disturbed, and we should be cautious about it, and we should never allow our enemy to be successful
Right.
in their goals.
Absolutely, and that of course is the intent and the resolve that we have seen on ground, in both by coming in from the military and the government as well. But I also want to understand, Farrukh, when we talk about these elements and the influence that they have, or how they spoil certain elements, or have this negative indoctrination that Brigadier Saab actually mentioned also. I want to understand then, why is it that we cannot overcome that with positive indoctrination? Why is it that the kind of influence that perhaps these elements are able to achieve isn't something that the government or the people within the country, or any elements that we can actually approach and make use of, can actually also exert, and we can have that sort of understanding or influence of the real issues, and not leave that sort of any vacuum or space for spoilers or terrorists to enter.
Right. Thank you, Slara. Welcome back, by the way.
Thank you.
I think that this is very important question, because Pakistan has been actually, since my childhood, we have been talking about few places, not too many. One is Afghanistan and the other one is India. And there, on both sides, it seems that we haven't been able to actually build a narrative that could have actually helped us. And when it comes to the country's internal matters, here too, there seems to be something that is awry. And I'm going to focus on that, but before that, I wanted to just actually go back to what Faisal was saying. I love his sentiment about, terrorists killing Pakistanis and nobody having any ethnicity. But you need to know why somebody was killed. If they are, the CNICs are checked and then they are killed, that means that their identity is being actually has become a bone of contention, and that's why they were victimized. So we have to first of all realize what kind of poison there has been there that needs to be diffused or removed from the system. Now, what happened, Sana, on 26th of August, particularly the night between 25th and 26th and then 26th, was, there is insurgency that went on. There are acts of terrorism that have taken place in Balochistan in the past. But the scale of it and the coordination and the synchronization was seriously worrying. And when this happens, that so many groups actually go to so many places and do so many evil acts, you need to have a very coherent response. Now, let me refresh everybody who's watching their memory that Majid Brigade's total tally, total number, is not more than somewhere between 100 and 150. And BLA, who actually essentially took responsibility and whose suicide squad is Majid Brigade, their total strength would actually vary between 1,000 and 1,500. So if 1,500 people can wreak havoc like this, we have to be really, really serious in containing this menace. Now, the biggest advantage they have is Balochistan's terrain and the size of the province, because everything is so scattered. It is half of Pakistan, Sana. So it becomes very difficult to cover all bases all the time. And you need to really, really plan ahead. And there seems to have been some kind of, laxity that was on display. So that's why the Prime Minister is there. So that's why the Apex Committee actually met, and now many decisions have been taken. Now the question about narrative, Sana, it is not as if there hasn't been a push for a positive, narrative building. I think wherever armed forces have gone, wherever federal government has presence, everywhere we have seen cadet colleges being built, roads and network of infrastructure, hospitals, free hospitals being built. Recently, last year, I visited many areas of Balochistan, especially those coastal areas that Brigadier Saab was also talking about. There are seen very impressive operations. Cadet colleges, which whose 50% of whose intake is free education for the locals, right? Total, covered by the state. Similarly, hospitals that are state-of-the-art hospitals and that are providing relief to the people. But then what happens? The biggest problem is the so-called intelligentsia in our bigger cities who are not sitting in Quetta or in Balochistan, because essentially they are lazy. They still are reacting to 40, 50-year-old narratives rather than actually realizing that there is something very vicious going on. One, whenever terrorists strike, I understand that what happened in Musa Khel was an outlier, and there they actually distinguished between people. But whenever a bomb goes off, say on Saryab Road in Quetta, say in many other parts of the country, of Balochistan, do you think that the bomb is going to ask whether you are Baloch or not? So these people are essentially killing everyone there, and they are enemies of civilization. So the lazy intellectuals who seem to actually suddenly become empathizers of people who are essentially, Faisal was calling them sympathizers of terrorism. I would call it terror apologists. If somebody is protesting and then telling on television or live, direct communication that people who were killed in Iran, their family members are sitting here, and then you have the audacity to call them missing persons. Today there is a proof that has emerged that one of the so-called missing persons was one of the suicide bombers, right? So with that kind of a situation, you have to understand that you will have to take the menace heads on.
Absolutely, and that is important, Brigadier Saab, in the way that we want to move forward. What does it mean then to have that sort of strategy on ground as well? I understand there has been some sort of announcements with regards to how there will be more deployment within Balochistan as well coming in from the federal government, and of course we have this as a focus of our strategy against terrorism. But in terms of really making sure that we're dealing with both kinetic and non-kinetic aspects of this fight, we are essentially deploying Azm-e Istikam in true letter and spirit, and making sure that all elements of the National Action Plan are also put in place. These are things that as a way forward or as part of the rhetoric is something that we all agree upon mostly. But in terms of the implementation, there doesn't seem to be a lot of clarity as to what will be the way that we will overcome things that were not present in the past, or were lacking in the past, or haven't been fruitful in the past. So I want your undertaking in terms of actual on-ground implementation. What aspects are necessary, in particular with Balochistan, and then of course in Pakistan in general?
We need to understand that there's a time to talk and there's a time to fight. And we should not draw the wrong conclusions through the facts on ground. We have been drawing the wrong conclusions. You see, I heard a lot of analysts talking about those leaders who came as chief ministers, like Mr. Akhtar Mangal and Dr. Abdul Malik later on, that during their tenure that things were better. Now I'll tell you about Dr. Abdul Malik's tenure. He reaped the fruits of the bitter struggle that was waged by our law enforcement agencies and our premier intelligence agency, that stamped out the vestiges of violence through their blood and toil. And they fought from 2009 onwards till 2014 for 4 or 5 years. It was a blood-stained fight, and the back of this insurgency was broken. There were times in 2009 where the flag of Pakistan could not be, unfurled, and the national anthem could not be recited in their schools. So that was the situation when the state had virtually ceded ground to these sub-nationalists and militants. There was a resolve, a struggle was waged, and these insurgents were on the run. Their back was broken. Now we must question ourselves as to what leads to their recrudescence. Why do they come back? Why is there no consistency in our policies? That once we sanitize the areas of their presence, maybe there is something wrong with our follow-up policies, and we lose sight of the objectives, and then we lower our guards and allow these places to regroup, because regroup they must, because they have external abatement. This area is in the crosshair of inimical forces that not only include India, but the Western countries as well, but certain Middle Eastern countries, our neighbors as well. It's a veritable witch's brew. So a lot of clarity is needed. So unless this clarity is there, no bold execution would be possible. We know there are sub-nationalists narratives which are propagated by very influential leaders who have joined the mainstream political parties. We also know that Javed Mangal, who is the brother of Mr. Akhtar Mangal, he was heading Lashkar-e-Balochistan, waging war against the state. He is married into Khair Bakhsh Mari's family. So these narratives and these, unless we know the dynamics, we talk and concentrate too much on idealism and theories and made by the big fashionable ideas of right side, human rights, and all that, with losing sight of the actual tribal dynamics, the motivation, the support basis. Unless we know that, we will never win this war. So, way ahead is that we very resolutely go against those who have taken up the arms, who do not believe in the concept of Pakistan. So, there is no quarter for them. For those, of course, who believe in the concept of federation, their rights and their economic deprivations need to be assuaged, and they are being assuaged. The state has finite resources, and those are being deployed incrementally, and a little patience has to be shown on both sides. Now, if we do not consider the external factors and only concentrate on the external grievances, internal grievances, then I believe we would be remiss in our conclusions, because these all internal uh, resistance movements, they have a clear linkage with an external narrative which is driving them. And in case we wish to fight this war, we need to take this whole society, the Baloch tribes. There are people who are pro-Pakistan, pro-federation, and those who have been fighting and shedding blood, fighting with these sub-nationalists on the behalf of Pakistan, on the side of law enforcement agencies. You answer my question. If Bukti's, death was the cause or one of the triggers of this narrative that sub-nationalists are using, why there is no insurgency in Bhukti's area? Logically, there should be the maximum disturbance there. There is none. Because why? Because there's an element within the tribe which has stood up, which has understood the realities, and which is not being handled by vested interests, likes of Harbiar abroad and others of his ilk. That is the way ahead. We need amongst the Mangals, amongst the Bhuktis, amongst the Maris, amongst the tribes that are on the coastal belt population, we need those who are willing to stand up for Pakistan, and there are plenty of people. If you give them chance, if you give them.
I was just going to come to that, that if there are those elements there, and of course there are, then why is it that they haven't been engaged, or have they been engaged and we haven't been successful in actually using them to ensure that sort of peace within the province?
Yeah, they were used and they were pretty effective. And then later on, like I say, that there is no consistency in the policies. We must have a consistency. Now our time has come. We must identify the threat, because the understanding of environment and understanding of the threat is half the battle won. So if you understand the nature of the threat, you can deploy your resources and use your kinetic resources, your law enforcement agencies. Because of the large expanse of this area, it lends itself ideally to guerrilla warfare. So deploy the maximum technological means, and nobody knows the terrain better than the locals. Co-opt them, use them, take them on your side. And along with the armed forces, they will not allow any disturbance, believe you me, if they are made stakeholders. So that's the right strategy, because you are asking about the way ahead, and I'm giving that. On the political side, you have a chief minister who is son of the soil, a quintessential Baluch who's been fighting insurgencies on behalf of the state of Pakistan. So his heart is in the right place. He understands the tribal dynamics. So let him take the lead and give him maximum leverage, deploy the maximum resources, and do not treat Balochistan as something on a blip on a radar, that whenever something goes wrong, we'll deploy the resources, then we'll come back. this is something that will keep on happening and keep on testing our patience. We need to deploy our resources to break the back of this insurgency and sever the linkages of the financial support chain. And we need to talk to Afghanistan and Iran to deny these insurgents free cross-border movement and safe sanctuaries. So this is a full menu, but there is no shortcut, and we need to proceed very sedulously, very determinedly, and side by side, we need to keep moving our development prong uh, undisturbed and unfazed by this violence that is being visited upon the province. So the
Right.
developments, livelihoods, and the kinetic actions and the support of the populace. This is the warp and woof of the effective strategy we need to adopt to counter this militancy.
Yeah. Brigadier Janjua, a very important question that is related to, of course, our our eastern neighbor India. Right after the ouster of US, withdrawal of US from Afghanistan, we saw that a series of people actually left Afghanistan and landed in New Delhi. And Lajpat Nagar is a place where around more than 15,000 Afghan citizens they are settled, and it is said that more than 5,000 are those who were previously aligned and working for NDS, National Directorate for Security, of course, the previous regime's intelligence agency. They are, of course, hand in glove with RAW because they were getting trained at RAW, they were getting facilitated by RAW during the Ghani regime. And of course, we know Amrullah Saleh, who once wanted to become, of course, president of Afghanistan. He is the key man. Can we consider them still, of course, active in Afghanistan? And if it is not the Taliban who are giving leverage to BLA, BLF, or TTP, then definitely these are the very NDS people who are sitting in India, and many more of them, they might have, of course, joined Taliban's ranks right after the withdrawal of US. Reason being, at that time, Taliban, they offered, of course, all of the population at large of Afghanistan to join hands with them for better Afghanistan. But at that time, NDS maybe joined hands, of course, with the Taliban, and now they are discreetly active not only against Pakistan but CPAC and eventually against China.
Yes, that possibility cannot be discounted. But as far as Afghan support to TTP is concerned, it is across the board. The present Afghan interim government, as well as the erstwhile elements of that belong to the what we used to call Northern Alliance, those are still active. And Afghan nationalism is unanimous in its animus against Pakistan due to several reasons. And the TTP elements, many were released from the jails, and unfortunately, some of those jail uh, birds they later came crossed over, and they were afforded an opportunity to come on and sit on the talk panel when Pakistan was negotiating with TTP, the abortive negotiation. So those are the mistakes that we must take cognizance of and look ahead. The present scenario is that the Afghan interim government is looking the other way and not dissuading or stopping TTP. Uh, I think fear factor is also there, some kind of desire to keep leverage over Pakistan. That cannot be discounted either. But the important thing is that having known those realities, it is up to us to secure control of our borders and put our own house in order internally and reduce the spaces for conduct of militancy or terrorism against our citizen and law enforcement agencies.
Right. Right. Thank you very much, Brigadier Sab, for joining us and being a part of the discussion today. Farrukh, when we talk about protecting our own borders, I want your take also in terms of course, how much of an impact that will create if we don't have the elements from outside of Pakistan also being curtailed. So while of course it is a good idea to look at what we can control and what we can see, while of course asking for reassurances such as from the Afghan Taliban regime, but if that isn't there and if there is no change coming in from the existence of safe havens outside of Afghanistan, how much of the efforts within our borders will have that impact?
Right, Sana, earlier when Brigadier Sahab was talking about whatever happened vis-a-vis TTP, he said that we have to take those matters into cognizance. I think that he was being generous here. Those people who threw away 20 years of progress in fighting terrorism, they should be taken to cleaners and they should be made an example. If we can't do that, then how are we going to fight a war, right? Regarding the overall, particularly my biggest concern is the way we suddenly, while we were negotiating with TTP, we withdrew all the pickets, removed all the pickets and allowed those people to walk in with weapons. If that can happen, and if after that so many policemen were killed in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, who should be held accountable for their death? Not those people who actually surrendered to the worst enemy possible. This is one aspect. Secondly, your question, policing is an important component. When you are going to fight terrorism, the first line of defense cannot be army. It cannot be intelligence. It has to be police. So empowerment of police is essential. In Balochistan, of course, there are two categories of areas, A and B, and there you have levies also. There too you will have to build capacity or then remove this dual method of governance and go for a single one and add more police. With that kind of state of affairs, perhaps things can improve. But I wanted also to bring attention to one thing that we keep on missing. Although we talk about India, but while talking to other countries, we said that we need to talk to Iran, we need to talk to Afghanistan. We forget what governments in the past, very powerful governments in Pakistan used to do when it came to India's involvement in Pakistan's domestic matters. For example, General Zia's cricket diplomacy is an example of how you confront the enemy. Similarly, if you remember, there was Sharm Sheikh, leaders meeting, and there was this agreement that was signed, and there India mentioned their activities or our concerns on Balochistan. So, are we going to take everything as fait accompli that India will continue to do this, and we have to keep on playing this cat and mouse game with India's agents? Or should we be confronting the source of all evil there as well? So these are important aspects, Sana, which will have to be tackled eventually. Let's hope in coming days there's this hope that SEO might actually bring in Modi here. So if we start the dialogue process, we have to take this matter heads on, because Pakistan would not want Indians to be harmed.
Right.
But Pakistanis should not be harmed by Indians either.
Absolutely, of course, absolutely. And of course, we're going to be seeing what's going to happen, and we'll be here to talk about it. Thank you, Farrukh, and thank you, Faisal, for joining us in the debate as always. That's all that we have time for. We'll now see you tomorrow.